Hello everybody, so welcome or welcome back to this series on French armoires. And somebody did leave their Ray-Bans in the gallery. I still have them, but they are coming in very handy this time of day. And now, French armoires, not only because the country of France was so important when furniture was most readily being made as an art form from the 1500s to the year 1840, but because this country is comprised of so many different culturally distinct regions, which left very special marks on furniture history. And so, as I endeavor to preserve a digital trace of these iconic armoires in here for everyone, the key here is going to be in showing you a panel of the most collectible ones that I've encountered so that we can hone in on the ones that showcase the height of style and quality of their cities or given regions so that we can look beyond the impressive size of all armoires into the details of artistic value only present in a select few. And now today we're going to be focusing on this one from the 1780s, which is really emblematic of fine furniture made in the south of France, in Provence at the time, and specifically the city of Nîmes. And now Nîmes should resonate with you, at least subconsciously, because the fabric denim is actually a play on words, the French words from Nîmes, de Nîmes, denim, you know, pretty good name for this durable fabric, which is dyed blue with the indigo that grows in the region. And now, more surprisingly, this armoire is a specific trace of a specific person, and it's very, very unusual to be able to trace a regional work, even a very fine one like this, to a specific maker. In this case, master furniture maker Pierre Pillot, who was one of the most talented, singular, and memorable furniture makers working in the south of France at the time. And now, Pierre Pillot moved to the city of Nîmes in 1776. And people inform me that there's some important stuff that happened that year, but we in the period furniture world recognize 1776 as the famous moment when Pierre Pillot moved from Paris to the city of Nîmes. And what was he doing in Paris, you might ask? Well, he was learning to make things like this with his bare hands, studying as an apprentice under Parisian master furniture maker, Mathieu de Beauve. And so, what happens is that Pierre Pillot brings the quality of Parisian woodworking with him to Nîmes in 1776, down to his regional workshop. And so, when we see an armoire that presents the notorious qualities of Nîmois production, these three curvilinear panels, the sunflower between the doors, maybe perhaps even the keyhole entry plates, open-worked in the southern French style, this highly sculpted bottom traverse, the policeman's hat-shaped cornice. When we see one, though, which presents a very high overall quality in its sculpture particularly, a real dexterity to this sculpture, we think of Pierre Pillot. But luckily for us, Pillot left some more distinguished traces, some more specific criteria for attribution to his hand. Specifically in his very memorable, unusual, and single use of neoclassical decorative and design elements. Specifically here with this Greek frieze that runs along the top of the piece, and even this sculpted acanthus at the top of the side post, above which we're going to find a Louis XVI period rosace motif. But now, something that you may have already noticed, which is also the most singular criteria for attribution to Pillot, is the presence of these neoclassical feet, which are squared and tapered, and which themselves end in squared and tapered hooves. And while we're down here, another subtle but very distinguished sign of high quality here is in the fact that the back feet of this armoire are actually finished. And if we take a look at this very fancy Bordelaise armoire from the same period next to it, we're going to see that despite its high quality, the back feet are not finished. And now if we look below the Pillot armoire, we're going to see that it is joined together, very exceptionally, not by the usual wooden dowels that hold these 18th century armoires together, but rather by metal screws. Now this is an assembly technique that we see very, very rarely on high quality Louis XVI period pieces, typically of Parisian production, at least for me, the one or two times I've even seen this. And so with the back feet finished, this very strange but high quality assembly joint, we see that we're dealing with something of very high quality, which presents the key criteria for attribution to Pillot, namely the squared and tapered feet and this very prominent Greek frieze across the top. And now Pierre Pillot's Parisian mentor, Mathieu de Bove, was also one of the first master furniture makers in Paris to pioneer the extensive use of neoclassical decorative elements. And so Pierre Pillot not only brings to Nîmes the excellence of Parisian woodworking that he had learned up there, but he also brings down to his southern French workshop this Parisian neoclassical trend. And that's why we see these neoclassical elements appearing so profusely on a southern French armoire, in a region where most masters were still producing pieces predominantly, if not entirely, in this curvilinear style fleuri, or the flowery style as it's very intelligently called. And we do see that occurring here on this piece, but we see that it is harmoniously blended with the neoclassicism that Pierre Pillot is known for. And so what's really remarkable about Pillot's work here is that he didn't just superficially decorate a fundamentally curvilinear piece with some neoclassical sculpture. He actually conceived a piece which integrates these two opposite styles into its very design. And so with this piece, we have something that is purely transitional, equal parts movement-driven curvilinear Rococo, and, let's say, opposing rectilinear neoclassical order. The side posts are not rounded, but rather angled, and this angularity is continued up to the top of the piece with the angled cornice, and then down into the squared and tapered feet. And if we look closely, we also see the intelligence of how Pillot planned the grain of the wood to appear flowing downward like stripes here, and we also see how this angularity is enhanced by the hinges, which are octagonal and not rounded, very exceptionally. And then we see a little bit more neoclassicism discreetly occurring here on the doors, with these subtle right angles, these notches seamlessly occurring around otherwise totally curvilinear panels, with these moldings that splash together in a bit of foliage here, with this one appearing to displace the shape of this panel downwards with its motion. So now, moving inside of this piece, we see that it retains its original S-shaped key, which is, like usual, a little torqued, more so than usual on this piece, perhaps from working the lock, but I think probably because it was stored, or this piece was transported at some point with the key in the lock, and it was then banged against something. You know, that happens. But anyway, inside the piece, we see that it also retains its original lock here, which is very unusual, and which also features some faint checkering. And this is just a little bit more decorative and artful than most locks, but it's in line with the nature of this entire piece. And now, what I have inside of this one at present really shows how these pieces were used to present silverware or porcelain in the 18th century dining room. And that's just important to helping us understand these more as versatile centerpieces of a home, as presentation pieces, and not necessarily as something that would have been relegated to a dark bedroom for clothing storage. Now, this one also retains its original shelving and its original shelf of drawers, although they are all a little bit warped. But again, that's why most of the time these shelves have been replaced at some point over the last 240 years. Now, the shelf of drawers, luckily, features one drawer which actually has a lock, the key to which is missing, but nevertheless, it's a pretty serious and interesting lock to take a look at. But if we take a look at these drawers, we're going to see one of the hallmarks of a pre-industrial period piece, which is in how the less visible, hidden, functional parts of the piece are going to be made in less noble woods. They're not going to be as refined. We see the use of pine here, and then we see a very rudimentary dovetail, which is held together by a hand-forged nail. And while we have it open, if we take a look under this shelf, we're actually going to see that beneath this green lining, there appears to be the original hand-painted wallpaper, which features oak leaves that are a Roman symbol of victory, and which correspond to the oak leaves here on the exterior of the doors. Now, this other door actually features a heart-shaped handle, because after all, this piece is in fact a wedding commission, a one-of-a-kind commission to celebrate a wedding long ago. And now all furniture of this nature back then was ordered and then created, and so it was inherently custom-made to some degree, but for wedding pieces, very special ones would be specially designed and created for the couple in question. And if we close the piece and take a look at the exterior again, we can take a look at this cartouche at the top, which actually features the monogram of the couple for whom this was ordered, seemingly T and C, Thibaut et Caroline, who knows? But in any case, we see that it's shrouded by a little bit of laurel or perhaps olive branches, and then it's coiffed by a typical Louis XVI period ribbon motif. And now I'm going to close this door here as we run out of light with that disastrous cirrus cloud, cirrus cloud. I'm a little rusty on my meteorology, but there's something going on over there that's destroying our light capabilities for the evening. But nevertheless, let's take a look at this highly sculpted bottom traverse, where we're going to see another emblem of wedding celebration, which is in fact an open-worked basket full of flowers here, which is shrouded in more Rococo stylized sculpture. And again, Rococo comes from rocky or uneven ground, as with this style we are bringing the tumultuous movement and beauty of nature indoors. But anyway, if we wanted to get specific, and period furniture generally allows us to do that, we can take a look here at the flowers. There appears to be a wild rose. No, that's a normal rose. There's a normal rose, followed by, yes, a wild rose, an elegantine, and then a daisy of all things. And my God, this is probably a star flower, but we can certainly all agree that it's a smaller, ambiguous flower. But if anything, we can now reconceptualize these oak leaves, these Roman symbols of victory here, with a wedding in mind, because with marriage, I suppose, we would be victorious over another person's heart. And so all that having been said, I'll end on an academic note with some information taken from furniture historian Henry Vial's 1912 work, in which he reportedly found, and he actually documents, a label from one of Pierre Pillot's pieces, which was still intact 100 years ago, and it said that on site at Pillot's workshop will be custom made whatever is ordered. And so I hope that you've enjoyed taking a closer look at what is surely here a custom commission from Pierre Pillot, which now commemorates the love of a young couple whose names and whose stories are forgotten.